Well now, let me tell you my story. A story from our quiet little town of Harmony Creek. It's a real story that might make you nod, or perhaps even shed a quiet tear, especially if you've ever felt the sting of being misunderstood. My own granddaughter, dear Lily. She once called me the most dreadful things, right up until the day she peeked into a place she wasn't meant to. "I hope you're satisfied, Gran," she'd spat, her voice tight with a young person's fury. "My father's gone, because of you. Does that make you proud? You made me an orphan. No father, no mother, no one who truly cares. You're not even a proper grandmother. You're just a mean old woman." That's what Lily, my own flesh and blood, shouted at me. Her little phone was held up, its red light blinking like an angry eye, as if she were broadcasting my supposed crimes to the whole wide world. I just sat there, my hands folded on the worn pine table, my cup of chamomile tea cooling beside me, while her words, sharp as broken glass, rained down. I didn't say a word. It wasn't the first time she'd flung such accusations my way, not by a long shot. But this time, it wasn't just us in our little kitchen. Oh no, this time she'd invited an audience, hundreds of unseen faces peering through their little screens, passing judgment on a woman they'd never laid eyes on. "This is her," Lily announced, swinging the phone towards me like I was some peculiar creature at a fair. "This is the woman who's ruined my life, who keeps me cooped up in this old-fashioned house and calls it looking after me, who thinks that just because she was born before all these gadgets, she knows everything." I looked at her, truly looked at my Lily, not at that glaring phone screen. The difference has always mattered to me. There she stood, my Lily, shoulders squared, her young heart blazing with what she thought was righteous anger. 15 years, old, bless her, and feeling so terribly betrayed. But underneath all that fiery talk, I saw something else, something familiar, a deep ache, a loneliness that echoed my own. "You never let me be like the other girls," she cried. "No late night chats on the phone, no sleepovers at friends' houses, no village dances. I can't even wear a pretty summer top without you making me feel like I'm about to cause a scandal. You're just obsessed with rules, and you try to pass it off as caring." I took a slow, steadying breath. My hand, I'll admit, trembled a bit as I reached for my teacup, but I steadied it before she could notice. "You never told me what really happened to my father," she went on, her voice cracking now. "You never said why my mother wasn't around. You just kept me here, like some old doll you were afraid someone might mend. I'm not your charity case, Gran. I'm not your secret to keep. I'm a person, and I'm tired of you expecting me to just be quiet." Still, I said nothing. What could I say? She wasn't wrong to feel lost or to be angry. She'd spent most of her young life living by rules she hadn't chosen, and for years I'd stood between her and the truth. Not to be cruel, mind you, but to shield her from it. Or at least, that's what I'd told myself. The comments were still flickering on her phone screen. I couldn't make them out, but I could feel their collective weight. The curiosity, the shock, the quick judgments from strangers who knew nothing of our lives. Lily turned the phone back to her own face. If you ever wondered what it's like to live with a real-life tyrant, well, here she is. She thinks being silent is a virtue, but silence is just empty. She ended her little broadcast with a sharp tap, the quiet that fell, then felt heavier than all her shouting. I looked down at my untouched tea, wrapping my fingers around the cup. The warmth had gone out of it, much like the trust between us, much like so many things we used to share when she was small enough to curl up on my lap. I remembered the very first night she came to live with me. Her clothes were too small. Her hair hadn't seen a good wash in days. She clutched a little knitted lamb, one ear missing, and didn't utter a single word for 3 whole days. Back then, she was scared of everything, the dark, the quiet, even me. Now, it seemed, she feared nothing, not even the truth she so desperately sought. "Aren't you going to say anything?" she asked, her voice softer now, almost daring me. I looked up, met her troubled eyes, and then I slowly shook my head. "No, dear," I said gently. "Not tonight." Her face twisted into an expression I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not scorn, but something closer to a broken heart. She left the room without another word. The old stairs creaked under her hurried steps, and her bedroom door slammed shut. Stayed there at the table, the old kitchen light flickering a bit. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the wind whispering through the pines outside, the steady tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall, a heartbeat that refused to give up. I'd known this day would come. It had been drawing nearer for years. Every rule I'd laid down, every story I'd skirted around, every bedtime when she'd asked about her mother, and I'd only offered a vague story about faraway stars. She'd asked me once when she was about 10, "Gran, why don't I have a mum like the other children?" I'd looked out the window then, at the willow tree bending in the breeze, and simply said, "Some folks, dear, just aren't cut out for mothering." That answer hadn't satisfied her, but it was all I could offer then. There were things I'd locked away, in drawers, in boxes, in the deepest corners of my heart. Not because I was ashamed, but because I believed, perhaps mistakenly, that loving someone meant carrying the heaviest burdens alone. Now I wondered if I'd mistaken silence for protection, because that silence, in the end, had made my granddaughter see me as a stranger. A girl who could stand there and call me all sorts of names to a faceless crowd, as if it were some television drama. She didn't know. She didn't know what I'd rescued her from, what I'd kept her from, what her own father, my Thomas, had begged me to do in his last desperate letters. And yet, somehow, in that moment, I wasn't angry with her. I was just tired. Tired of holding a truth too heavy for one old woman. Tired of pretending that survival didn't come with a steep price. Tired of being the stern figure in a story, where I'd only ever tried to love her the best I knew how. As the kitchen grew dim and the clock chimed midnight, I sat there alone and thought, if she must resent me, then let her. Let her resent me now, so that one day perhaps she can forgive herself for not knowing. Lily came to me when she was just a little thing, barely 6. Her mother, bless her troubled soul, was lost to difficulties I don't have gentle words for. Her father, my son Thomas, vanished one evening. No goodbye, no explanation, just a rushed message on my answering machine that said, "Take care of her. Mum, I just can't anymore." And then, only silence. I picked Lily up from a cramped little flat that smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. Her shoes were too small, her lips chapped. She held that knitted lamb, the one with the missing ear, and didn't speak for the entire journey to my cottage. When we pulled into my lane, she looked up at the tall oak trees surrounding the house and whispered, "Is this where the strict lady lives?" I said nothing. I didn't take her hand. I led her to the little spare room and told her to put her few things away. I made porridge for supper, and we ate in silence. She didn't cry. I think she was too weary for tears. That was how it began. I wasn't a soft, cuddly grandmother. I won't pretend I was. I fed her. I clothed her. I made sure she had clean sheets, warm socks, and a roof that didn't leak. But I didn't tuck her in at night with fairy tales. I didn't kiss her forehead and tell her she was precious. I was afraid, you see, of getting too close, because I knew, deep down, that the world could be a harsh place, and I didn't want the leaving, if it ever came to that, to hurt more than it absolutely had to. As she grew, the silence between us stretched, filled only by my rules. And oh, I had rules. No gallivanting around after dark, no overly revealing clothes. A young lady must have her dignity. No heavy makeup before she was older. No sleepovers unless I'd had a good chat with the parents myself. No parties where there might be unsuitable company or strong drink. No wandering off into the deep woods at dusk, and certainly no sharing. Every little thought on those newfangled online things, every rule had a reason, born from a mistake I'd seen someone make, or a danger I knew lurked in the world. But to Lily, they were just chains. At school, I heard the whispers. The children in the village started calling me the old woman in the cottage by the woods, the one who kept her granddaughter locked away. I knew it. Children often poke fun at what they don't understand. I became a character in their little dramas. And Lily, bless her heart, just wanted to be like everyone else. She wanted to wear the same silly fashions, talk about the same trivial things, laugh at jokes I couldn't find the humor in. She yearned to blend in, but I wouldn't let her. I wasn't raising her to fit in. I was raising her to survive. Still, the price for that was high. She began to resent me around the age of 12. That's when she got clever, started hiding things. She'd sneak a forbidden mobile phone into her room and whisper into it under her quilt. I'd find sweet wrappers I never bought tucked behind her dresser. Her internet searches, when I dared to look, were for things like how to leave home early and getting away from strict grandparents. One day, I heard giggling from the porch. I opened the door to find Lily and 2 of her friends huddled around her phone. They were watching a video she'd made. It showed me in the kitchen, humming an old hymn my own mother used to sing, stirring a pot of beef stew. The camera was shaky, hidden. The dim lighting made my face look gaunt, the shadows under my eyes deeper than they were. She'd added silly sound effects, a witch's cackle, a clap of thunder. The caption read, "Caught my gran, the kitchen, sorceress, brewing up a storm in her cauldron." It was just stew, mind you. I said nothing then. I just closed the door. But that night I wept. Not because my feelings were hurt, I'd been called worse in my time, but because I saw how far I had pushed her, without ever offering her a hand to hold on to. I had become the villain in her own life story. That silly video didn't cause much of a stir at first, just a few likes and chuckles from her friends. "This is hilarious. She looks like she's casting a spell." Lily laughed when she read them. She even showed me once, making fun of how I squinted at the tiny screen. "You've got admirers, Gran," she'd teased. I didn't laugh. Weeks passed, and then she posted another. This time she'd set the scene. A candle in the window, some eerie church music playing from her little speaker. She hid under the table and filmed my shadow moving against the kitchen wall. The caption, "Gran caught doing her mysterious midnight rituals." That one, for some reason, took off. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments. A few people even asked if she wanted to collaborate on some sort of haunted house series. She didn't, thank goodness, but she enjoyed the attention. I pretended not to see, until the day I simply couldn't ignore it any longer. She had just posted a new one. I was at the sink, shelling peas for supper, when she burst in, laughing, phone in her hand. "You have to see this, Gran," she said, flipping the screen around. "Your face is absolutely priceless." The video was of me again, this time dozing in my armchair, twitching slightly in a dream. She'd added screechy violin music and zoomed in on my mouth, which was half open. The caption read, "The old dear taking a nap before her nightly mischief." She howled with laughter. I just stared at the screen, and then the room seemed to tilt. The bowl of peas slipped from my grasp, clattering into the sink. Cold water splashed up. My knees buckled. I think I hit the floor before I could even call her name. When I came to, she was gone, and I was alone in the kitchen, my head throbbing, my hands shaking, and a heavy truth settling on my chest. I had saved her from one kind of pain, only to lead her straight into another. I had made myself a distant, stern figure to make her feel the world was orderly. But in doing so, I had vanished from her heart. And now, the world thought I was some sort of monster. Maybe, I thought with a pang, they weren't entirely wrong. It happened on a Tuesday evening, after the stew and before the big thunderstorm rolled in. I hadn't been feeling quite myself all day. There was a peculiar tightness in my chest, like a rope being slowly pulled, but I'd ignored it, the way one ignores most aches and pains at my age. The body, after all, is just an old house. Things creak and groan, and you learn to live with it. Lily had been upstairs for hours, her door shut, muffled laughter seeping through the floorboards. I hadn't disturbed her. I knew better than to knock when she was in one of her moods. I was standing at the sink, washing out a teacup, when the pain truly gripped me. It was sudden and cruel. My knees went first, then my vision blurred. I remember reaching out, thinking I could steady myself on the counter, but the ceramic cup slipped from my fingers and shattered just before I crumpled to the linoleum. I don't recall much after that. They told me later it was Mrs. Albright from next door who found me. She'd noticed my kitchen light still burning well past midnight and, bless her concerned heart, decided to peek through the window. She saw me on the floor and, without a second thought, came in through the unlocked back door. She called for the ambulance, rode with me to the hospital, and even signed the necessary papers. Not Lily. Lily, she claimed, had been asleep, headphones on, in her room upstairs. She said she hadn't heard a thing. But when I returned home a few days later, weak but on the mend, something in the house had shifted. And it wasn't just the lingering scent of antiseptic. There was a drawer in my bedroom, in the old mahogany. Chest of drawers I'd owned since my 20s. It was always locked. But I found it slightly ajar, and the little silver key, which I usually wore on a chain around my neck, was missing from my trinket dish. I knew instantly what had happened. She had opened the drawer. She had found the rosewood keepsake box. That box and its contents were never meant for her eyes, not like that. I had kept it hidden, not because it held shameful secrets, but because its contents were sacred to me. It held the fragile pieces of a life I had tried so desperately to keep from shattering completely. A collection of letters, faded photographs, things I looked at when I needed to remember that I had, at least once, done something good. Something brave, or at least something necessary. She had opened it. And so, as I rested under my quilt that following week, weak and weary, I waited. Waited for the storm that was sure to break when she realized her father hadn't just vanished into thin air, but had lived and written and begged me for help. I hadn't spoken of those letters in years. The first one arrived months after. I took Lily in. It was short, hurried, written in pencil on flimsy paper. He didn't know if I'd even read it, he said. "I am so sorry, Mum. I should have done more. You were right. She's not safe here." There were more after that. Some came every few weeks. Others were spaced out by seasons. Sometimes he wrote from his car, from a temporary address, from a place with no return details. They weren't love. Letters. Not in the usual sense. But they were filled with a father's anguish, with guilt, and with something deeper than a simple apology. They were the desperate words of a man trying to be a father while drowning in the shame of having already failed. He wrote about Lily, how she used to cry when the lights flickered, how she clung to a tatty old blanket that smelled of smoke. He wrote about her mother, how the addiction had twisted her, sharpened her voice into a weapon, how she had once sold Lily's little winter coat for a fix. And he wrote about me. "I know you think I'm weak, Mum," one letter said. "You're not. Wrong. But please, please keep her safe. Please let her stay with you." I read those letters again. The day after I came home from the hospital, I pulled the rosewood box from the drawer myself this time, Not because I'd changed my mind about her seeing them, but because it was too late to protect the secret. The top letter, its corners creased, faint fingerprints smudged across the ink, had clearly been read recently. It was the one he had written after I refused to let him take Lily back. He'd come to the cottage one night, shouting from the porch, drunk and angry and desperate. "I'm her father," he'd yelled. "You were," I'd said quietly from behind the locked door. "Until you let her go hungry." He had driven off into the darkness. A week later, that letter arrived. It said, "If anything happens to me, Mum, tell her I tried. Tell her I fought. But if she grows up hating me, let her. Let her be angry. At least she'll still be alive. If she grows up hating you, I hope you'll forgive her, because you did what I could not. You saved her." Lily had read that. I knew it. And yet, she hadn't said a word to me since. She moved about the house differently now. Not angry, not spiteful, just quiet. There was no mocking, no secret filming, no muffled laughter from behind her closed door. She made me tea without being asked. She did the washing up without complaint. Something had shifted. I watched her closely one evening as she stood by the window, staring out at the trees. Her shoulders looked smaller than before, or perhaps I'd just stopped seeing her as an adversary. She turned to me and asked, her voice barely a whisper, "Do you still think about him, Gran?" I didn't pretend not to know who she meant. "Yes, dear," I said, "every single day." And for a moment, we just stood there, two women, a generation apart, bound by the silence and sorrow of a man we both had loved and lost and forgiven in our own different ways. The rosewood box was back in the drawer now, but its contents no longer belonged only to me. They belonged to her too. And though I could not erase what she had seen or how she had come to see it, I could finally stop pretending that silence was enough to bear the weight of love. I never intended for her to read those letters, not a single one. They were never meant for her hands, not even when she was grown. I had kept them for myself, a quiet collection of guilt and grief, sealed in that rosewood box and tucked away beneath folded linens in a locked drawer. It was the only way I could hear his voice again, the only way I could remember my Thomas, as more than the broken man he became. But secrets, as they say, have a way of coming to light. And now that she had seen them, there was no going back. I reread the letters myself that week, slowly, one by one. Not as a mother, nor as a grandmother, but as a woman tracing the fading outline of a profound loss. My son, Thomas, never minced words in his writing. He didn't try to pretty up his shame or excuse his past. The ink was raw, the words uneven, sometimes desperate, always painfully honest. In one letter, he wrote, "I found her trying to sell Lily's little music box today, the one with the ballerina. Said we needed the money for food, but I knew better. Lily hadn't eaten properly in 2 days, and her mother didn't seem to care. Lily just stood there, watching. Didn't even cry. That was worse than anything." I remembered that music box. I'd given it to Lily on her 4th birthday. She'd treasured it. When I picked her up that terrible night, God, I'll never forget it. She didn't even ask where her music box had gone. She just climbed into my car, clutching that threadbare blanket like it was the only solid thing in her world. Another letter came weeks later. She took the blanket, Mum, swapped it for pills. Lily shivered all night. I wrapped her in my old coat, told her it was a camping game. She believed me, but she won't keep believing forever. That was the night I drove clear across the state and knocked on his door without any warning. I didn't ask permission. I didn't wait. I took Lily into my arms, wrapped her in my own warm shawl, and said, "You've done all you can, Thomas. Let me do the rest." He didn't fight me. He just wept. In the beginning, Lily would ask about her mother. Little questions, soft ones. Why doesn't Mummy call? Or, did she forget my birthday, Gran? I answered with silence, or a gentle hum, or a vague, not everyone knows how to be a mummy, sweet pea. As she got older, the questions turned sharper, edged with a child's pain. Why did you take me away? Did she hate me? Did Daddy hate me, too? I lied. I told her father had to go away for important work, that her mother had been unwell, that they both loved her very much, just from a distance. I never expected the truth to find her before I could find the right words, the right moment to explain it properly. The final letter in the box was the one I feared most, the one I had read more times than any other, the one with a deep crease, down the middle from being folded and unfolded, again and again. He had written it the week before he died. Mum, if you're reading this, I hope you'll forgive me. I'm going to get her. I know you won't approve. I know you think it's too dangerous. But I can't live with myself knowing I left my daughter with questions I never answered. The ink smudged at the bottom of the page, a single drop spreading like a bruise. He never made it. The next morning, there was an accident out on Route 17. Rain-slicked roads, a pickup truck skidded into a ravine. No identification on him, just a plain wedding band and a receipt for a small, fluffy teddy bear from a roadside shop. I never told Lily. How could I? How could I look into the face of a child who already felt so abandoned and say, "He was coming, for you, my darling, but he died on the way." Instead, I carried that terrible burden for both of us. I let her grow up believing her father had simply walked away. I thought I was protecting her from more pain. Maybe, in a way, I was protecting myself too, in that final heartbreaking letter he'd written, "If she grows up hating you, Mum, let her. If she throws every ounce of her pain at your feet, let her. Because you're the only one who stayed, the only one who chose her safety over your own comfort. You're the last good thing in her world, and sometimes love means letting them believe you're not. That's the deal. That's what love looks like now." And so, I did. I let her resent me. I let her twist me into the villain, the strict guardian, the old woman in the cottage. And I never once corrected her. Until now. She has seen the truth, whether she was ready for it or not, and in her silence since, I've seen something begin to unravel. Not anger, not rebellion, but a dawning understanding. One night, she stood at my bedroom door and didn't say a word. She just looked at me, her eyes no longer wild with teenage fury, but full of something much heavier, something akin to sorrow. And I knew, without her saying a thing, that she had read that final letter, that she had heard his voice, just as I had, all those years. And that for the first time in a long, long while, she was seeing me, not as the enemy, but as the woman who had stood between her and a world that would have surely consumed her. After the letters, Lily changed. But change, I've learned, in my long life, isn't always a sudden storm. More often, it comes in small, quiet movements, like the first breath of spring after a hard winter. She began leaving her dishes in the sink rinsed, instead of crusted over. She'd ask if I needed anything from the village shop, though she rarely waited for my answer, just brought back what she thought I'd like. She started making 2 cups of tea in the evenings instead of 1, leaving mine on the counter, wordless but warm. Then one morning, I noticed she had taken down the dusty boxes of Old Town newspapers from the Historical Society. I said nothing. I knew what she was doing. She was chasing ghosts, piecing together a story. And this time, I let her. She spent hours at the library, scrolling through microfilm of local obituaries and old police reports. She borrowed school yearbooks from neighbors who still remembered her father as a bright, if sometimes reckless, young man. She even talked to Mrs. Albright and Mr. Henderson, the old postman, and the kindly gentleman at the garage who had sold my Thomas coffee every morning the year before he died. She was trying to trace a line through the silence I had built around us. I let her, because it was time. I saw the exact moment the full truth landed on her. It was late. She came home with her jacket soaked through from an unexpected shower, her eyes rimmed with red. I was sitting in the living room, crocheting a new shawl. She stood in the doorway, clutching a photocopy in one hand, a faded newspaper clipping. Fatal accident on Route 17. Slippery roads. No foul play suspected. Was he coming to get me, Gran? She asked, her voice barely a breath. I looked at her, at the crumpled paper, at the girl who only weeks ago had called me her jailer. Yes, Lily, I said softly. And that one word, that simple affirmation, seemed to make her knees give way. She sank onto the sofa across from me, her arms limp at her sides. He was coming for me, she whispered, more to herself than to me. And I never knew. I set my yarn aside. You were 7 years old, my dear, I said gently. You were just a little girl. You didn't need to carry that. But I do now, she said, her voice thick. I carry it now. She stayed there for a long time, staring at nothing. I thought she might cry, or scream, or rage. But instead she asked, "Why did you never tell me?" I folded my hands in my lap. Because, Lily, I said, choosing my words carefully. If you had known, you would have blamed yourself. You would have wondered if your childish anger made him come. If your sadness called him back. If your innocent need became his death sentence. She looked at me then, her eyes wide and trembling. And I would rather, I said, my voice quiet, but firm, be misunderstood by you for a lifetime than have you hate yourself for a single day. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, thick, almost sacred. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out another paper. This one, a printed email from a county clerk. His name, the date of the crash, an inventory of what was found in the vehicle. No drugs, no alcohol. Just a suitcase, half-packed, a small fluffy teddy bear, and a letter addressed to me, never mailed. Did you know? She asked, her voice choked. I nodded. The police called me the next morning, said he had me listed as his next of kin. And you never told anyone. I told the coroner where to send his remains, I said softly. I told the cemetery which plot to prepare. I told the grass where to grow. She shook her head, a small, lost movement. No funeral. No, dear. Just me and him and the earth. She covered her face with both hands then, the paper fluttering to the ground. I watched her shoulders shake, and for a moment, she looked so much like her father, it stole the breath from my lungs. Then she asked the question I had never, ever expected to hear. If I don't hate you anymore, Gran, she said, her voice muffled by her hands, do you forgive me? I looked at her then, not as a child, not as someone I had raised out of duty or blood, but as a young woman who had finally, painfully, grown into the shape of her own truth. I managed a small, tired smile. Oh, Lily, I said, there is nothing to forgive. Love, when it is real, doesn't keep a tally. It doesn't wait for apologies or make lists of wrongs. It simply endures, quietly, without any need for applause. She got up and came to sit beside me on the old sofa. For the first time in so many years, she rested her head on my shoulder. I gently stroked her hair. She didn't pull away. And in that moment, I realized I had done something right. Not everything, perhaps, but something. I had not saved my son. I had not stopped the car or changed the road or made the rain stop, falling that terrible night. But I had kept his daughter alive. And now, at last, she knew. The little phone was propped up on a makeshift stand, a pile of old gardening books and a jam jar. Lily adjusted the angle twice, then stepped back and smoothed down the front of her blouse. She was wearing one of my old soft cardigans, a pale blue one, a bit oversized on her slim frame, the sleeves bunched at her wrists. I sat quietly in my usual armchair by the window, the same spot where I'd watched countless seasons change and kept so many words locked inside. But not today. Today, she was going to speak. She took a breath, deep and a little shaky, then tapped the button to start her online broadcast. "Hi," she said, her voice a little uncertain. I don't really know how to start this, but I guess I should begin by saying I was wrong. A few dozen people were already watching, her online followers, many of whom had liked and shared and laughed at the videos she had once posted of me, of the mean old woman, the kitchen sorceress, with too many rules and not enough softness. Lily continued, "You've probably seen my other videos, the ones where I made fun of my gran, where I said she was controlling, where I said she was cruel, and honestly, at the time, I believed it." She glanced over at me for just a second. Her eyes didn't flinch. "But I found something a few weeks ago. A box, letters, stories, things I was never supposed to read, but I did. And now, I know the truth." She paused, swallowing hard. "My mom, she had problems. She left. And my dad, he didn't abandon me like I thought. He died. He died coming back for me, trying to bring me home. The home he thought I'd never forgive him for leaving." The comments started to scroll by on the little screen. Hearts, question marks, a few, "Oh my goodness, what?" Lily pressed on, her voice gaining strength. "My gran, Agnes, isn't a tyrant. She's not a villain. She's the one who stepped in when my parents couldn't. She's the one who made sure I ate, who made sure I wasn't taken into care, or lost, or worse. But instead of thanking her, I resented her. I called her names. I recorded her without her, knowing. I put her private life online and laughed about it." She exhaled, a long, shaky breath. "There's one letter I keep thinking about. It's from my dad. He told her, 'If she grows up hating you, let her. At least she'll still be alive.' That's how much my gran loved me. That's how much she gave up to protect me." Lily looked straight at the screen again, her voice steady now. "To the people who thought my videos were funny, who commented with laughing faces and called her names, I need you to know you were laughing at someone who saved my life. And I let you. That's on me." She stepped a little closer to the camera. Then, just enough for her eyes, earnest and filled with a new understanding to fill the frame. "To my gran," she said, her voice cracking for the first time, "I am so, so sorry." I didn't move, not yet. Emily turned slightly, so the camera caught both of us in the shot. Me sitting in my worn armchair, hands folded in my lap, my gaze calm. She standing beside me, a little stooped, as if under a great weight. She said, "If she's any kind of witch, then she's the kind that stands between a child and the darkness, the kind that holds the storm back with her bare hands." The screen filled with hearts. A few people typed, "I'm crying. This is beautiful. Forgive her, please." I didn't cry. I just nodded once, slowly. Then I said, for all of them too, here, my voice quiet but clear, "You didn't know, child. Now you do. That's enough." Lily didn't say anything else after that. She ended the broadcast quietly. No dramatic flourish, just a swipe of her thumb. and the screen went black. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the clock. Then she crossed the room and knelt beside my chair. "I can't take it back, Gran," she whispered, her head bowed. "I know, dear," I replied. "But I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel alone again," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I looked down at her, at the top of her bowed head, and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. "I never was alone, Lily," I said softly. "Not really. You were always here, even when you didn't understand why." She rested her head against my knee. Outside, the wind carried the first scent of spring, soft and fragrant. And inside, in my old heart, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known in a very, very long time. I don't know the exact moment I stopped being the mean old woman in her eyes. There was no dramatic scene, no sweeping music like in those moving pictures, no grand apology written in tears. It just shifted, slowly, gently, like spring creeping into the tired bones of winter. One morning I woke up and realized Lily had started calling me Gran again, more often than her. She laughed in the kitchen sometimes, a genuine light sound, instead of filming in secret. She'd touch my hand when she passed the salt at dinner. She lingered in the sitting room after supper, and I, in return, found myself softening in places I thought had turned to stone years ago. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, our little cottage wasn't silent. We filled it with small, comforting sounds, friendly banter over a slightly burnt piece of toast, the radio humming old tunes from my youth, the scrape of chairs pulled close to the table, the quiet rustle of pages turning as we worked on a family album she insisted we build together. She had found my old boxes of photographs one afternoon and spent hours going through them, asking who each person was, what each faded face meant. Some names I hadn't spoken aloud in decades. Some memories I thought had long turned to dust came rushing back as I pointed and smiled, and yes, sometimes dabbed at my eyes. "This was your father, Lily, when he was 7, I said, holding up a picture of him in a cowboy hat made from a cereal box. "He made me call him Sheriff Tom for 3 whole days after that birthday." Lily laughed, a real, happy laugh. "He looks a bit like me," she observed. "He was a lot like you," I nodded. Stubborn, curious, and always a bit too brave for his own good. We spent that whole Sunday cutting, pasting, and labeling. She decorated the cover with pressed wildflowers from the garden and wrote in neat, cursive, "The family I never knew I had." She took me to the doctor the next week. My blood pressure had been acting up again. She made the appointment without asking, drove me there, and sat in the waiting room, fiddling with her phone. But I knew she was listening for my name to be called. Afterwards, she bought me a cup of ginger tea from the little cafe and told me sternly to stay off the salt. "Yes, ma'am," I teased, and we both chuckled at the funny reversal of our roles. She started cooking on Fridays. Simple things at first. Pasta with tomato sauce, sandwiches, scrambled eggs that were often too runny. But then one day, I heard pots clanging, and when I stepped into the kitchen, she was standing over the stove, stirring something in my old cast-iron pot. "What are you making, dear?" I asked. She looked a bit sheepish. "Your chicken and dumpling soup?" My heart did a little flutter. She had found the recipe card, yellowed and smudged with flour, tucked between the pages of one of my old cookbooks. It was the same soup I used to make for her father when he'd had long days at school, or came home with bruises he wouldn't explain. It was the one thing he never refused, no matter how much trouble he was in. I watched her taste it, wrinkle her nose, add a bit more time. When she handed me a bowl, I couldn't speak for a full minute. It tasted almost right, almost like mine, but in its own way, it was perfect. That night, she posted a photo of the soup on her social media page, with a caption that read, "I used to think my gran was cruel. Now I see she's the strongest woman I've ever known. It caused quite a stir online again, but this time, for very different reasons. The comments were full of people saying they had misjudged their own elders, that they were calling their grandmothers, that they were sorry for every time they'd mistaken love for control. I read every word, slowly. Then I turned off the phone and held it to my chest for a moment. We started planting herbs together, just a few pots on the back porch. Basil, mint, parsley. I told her the secret to keeping rosemary alive was to talk to it every morning. She rolled her eyes, but I caught her whispering to the plants a week later when she thought I wasn't looking. She wrote in a new journal every night, one she called Our Story Journal. She asked me for stories before bed, a reverse bedtime routine, you might say. And I told her things I had never told anyone, about her father's first tooth, his first schoolboy fight, the time he brought home a stray kitten and tried to keep it hidden in the airing cupboard. She cried sometimes, quietly, resting her head on my shoulder, letting the tears fall without shame. I cried too. It wasn't easy, this mending. Forgiveness never is. But it was real. One evening, we were walking the path through the woods behind our cottage, the one I used to take alone, praying for strength in those difficult years. The trees were beginning to turn, painting the world in shades of orange and gold. She stopped, pointed up at a hawk gliding lazily above us. "I used to think you were watching me like that," she said, her voice thoughtful, waiting to pounce. I raised an eyebrow. "And now?" "Now," she said, turning to me with a small smile. "Now I think you were watching to make sure nothing else did." Her smile widened, and I felt the years, heavy as they had been, melt a little from my old bones. I don't know how much time I have left on this good earth. Time is a rather stingy companion as you get older. But I do know this. My granddaughter sees me now. Not just the woman with too many rules, or the shadow of a mistake she couldn't name, but me. Agnes. The woman who stayed. And in her eyes, I am no longer a mean old woman. I am home. The years passed quietly after that, the way good years often do, slipping by like beads on a string. Lily grew up, not just in height or the tone of her voice, or the shape of her shoulders, but in her spirit. The kind of growth you don't see in mirrors, only in moments. She finished her schooling, then went off to agricultural college, and then she came back home. Not out of necessity, mind you, but by choice. And that choice, her wanting to be here, meant more to me than any fancy diploma ever could. She started a little organic farm co-op right here in our county. New Roots Farm, she called it. A name, she said, that came from us, from the idea that even wounded land, or a wounded heart, could grow something beautiful again if you tended to it right. She grew honest crops, no harsh chemicals, no cutting corners. She became a quiet force in our little community, speaking up at town hall meetings, helping to rebuild the farmers' market, even getting some of the youngsters from the local high school involved in planting and harvesting. There was talk of a feature on the local news, maybe even a grant from the state, but none of that mattered as much to me as what she did at the end of each long day. She came home to me, to our little cottage. One afternoon in late October, the air still held a touch of warmth, but was edged with the crisp gold of autumn. She packed a thermos of warm apple cider and an old patchwork quilt, and said, "We're going for a walk, Gran." I let her lead me, past the cottage, down the familiar path through the woods, the one we used to take during those first quiet days of forgiveness, and then farther, past the old, unused barn, to where the fields stretched wide and tall, filled with sunflowers, their heads heavy and golden, waving in the breeze like hands reaching toward the sky. She had planted them herself that spring. I had watched her from the porch, mud on her jeans, her hair tied back with a bit of twine, laughter echoing in her lungs. She had grown every single stalk with the kind of care some people save only for their children. We spread the quilt in a small, sunny clearing between the rows, where the light slanted through the leaves in long, glowing lines, the kind of light that makes you believe in something more, something sacred. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping the warm cider, listening to the gentle rustle of the sunflower field around us. Then she reached over and took my hand. Her fingers were strong now, calloused in places from her work, but warm and steady in mine. "Do you remember," she said softly, "when I told the whole world you were a mean old woman?" I smiled. "It was quite a performance, dear. Hard to forget." She laughed, a low, gentle sound. "And now here I am," she said, gesturing to the vibrant field around us. "Farming the same land you once dreamed of retiring on, feeding people, helping things grow, all because you didn't give up on me." I squeezed her hand. "I never gave up on you, Lily," I said. I just got very, very quiet for a while. She looked at me then. Truly looked. Her eyes deep and brown, full of that same soulful ache her father once carried. "I used to think love meant being rescued," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "But it doesn't, does it, Gran? It means staying. Staying even when the person you're staying for tells you to go." I nodded, my throat tight. "That's the kind of love I always had for you, child," I whispered back. She blinked away a few tears. "I'm so sorry it took me so long to see it." I shook my head. "You saw it when it mattered most." She pulled something from her coat pocket, a tiny silver locket, tarnished with age, on a delicate chain. "I found this in one of Dad's letters," she said. "He wrote that you gave it to him for me the day he left me with you. He said you wanted me to have something beautiful." I touched the cool metal. It was so small, so precious. "I tied it around your little wrist myself, the day we left that place," I said, my voice thick with memory. "I wanted you to feel loved, even if you couldn't understand it all then." She smiled, a watery but genuine smile. "I understand now, Gran. I remember now." The wind shifted then, sending a soft whisper through the sunflowers, like a gentle round of applause. "I want you to live here with me, Gran," she said suddenly, her voice clear and sure. "In the little guest cottage, the one by the apple trees. We can plant lavender out front. I'll build you a comfortable bench in the sun. You'll never have to cook a meal unless you truly want to." I chuckled, a rusty sound. "Are you offering to take care of an old woman, Lily?" "No, Gran," she said, her gaze unwavering. "I'm offering to take care of the woman who once took care of me, when I didn't even know how much I needed it." There was a long, comfortable silence, filled only by the sounds of nature. Then she said, with a voice full of something ancient and true, "I am so incredibly lucky you loved me, Gran, especially when I was hardest to love." I turned my hand in hers, held it tight. "And I whispered, my own eyes finally letting go of tears I hadn't realized I was holding, "have waited my whole life to hear you say that, my dear girl." We sat there as the sun dipped lower, turning everything to amber and gold. The shadows grew longer, but the light around us stayed warm. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I leaned mine against hers. The sunflowers swayed. The world turned, and for the first time in a long, long time, I felt not just peace, but a deep sense of purpose. My life, as messy and painful and quiet as it had often been, had meant something. It had grown something beautiful. Thank you for letting an old woman share her heart with you. It's not a fairy tale, this story of mine, but the truth of it stayed silent for far too long. If you've ever been misunderstood, ever loved someone in quiet sacrifice, ever given your all without anyone noticing, then I hope my story found a little place in your heart. There's a lot of wisdom held in a grandmother's heart. You know, if only we take the time to listen. Perhaps we'll meet again and share more stories.